All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, for the second time in the last 3 years, Oklahoma will finish the college football season with a losing record as their first year in the Southeastern Conference was challenging, to say the least. The Sooners managed just 2 wins inside of the SEC, the powerful SEC. And unfortunately for Oklahoma, it's back to the drawing board for head coach Brent Venables and company. Four of Oklahoma's six losses in the SEC this year were by double digits. Okay. And no disrespect to, South Carolina, who blew Oklahoma out in Norman a couple of months ago, 35-9. And no disrespect to Navy. Navy got their first 10-win season in some time, after beating Oklahoma in the Armed Forces Bowl yesterday. No disrespect to those two fine programs. But if you're Oklahoma, you don't go there, or you don't go to Oklahoma rather, to get blown out by schools like that. Okay, and I'm not saying like trying to say like that, trying to put them down, but no, if you're Oklahoma, you're a blue blood of the sport. You're supposed to be the one doing the blowing out, not getting blown out. You look at Oklahoma as a whole; they lost by 10 at home earlier this season to Tennessee, their first loss of the season. And that was a reality check, okay? And, you come back, you got destroyed by Texas. Totally understand that. Texas is on a whole another level right now compared to Oklahoma. The Sooners had a ton of injuries, especially at wide receiver in that game. And then, of course, finishing the season with blowout losses on the road in Baton Rouge to LSU, and then losing by 1 point yesterday in the Armed Forces Bowl. But I will say this before I go dive a little bit further. In regards to the Armed Forces Bowl, the Sooners did come to play yesterday. And I know that they were depleted, whether it was injuries, the transfer portal, you name it. Oklahoma did come to play yesterday. They did jump out to a 14 to nothing lead in the first quarter over Navy, but they had opportunities to extend that lead and they just could not do that. And Navy is a team, okay, that if you're going to beat them, you had better pack a lunch, okay? And once Navy got going, Oklahoma was in for a battle, a 60-minute battle, as they found out the hard way yesterday. But nonetheless, things have got to change, okay, for Oklahoma. And I know you got injuries, like I said, you got the transfer portal, you got guys that should be there who weren't there, you name it. But nonetheless, things have to change for this program because we're talking about Oklahoma finishing this season 119th in the nation in passing. They only had 16 passing touchdowns this season. And you think about in recent years under different head coaches, Oklahoma would have gotten 16 touchdowns in about 3 or 4 games, touchdown passes, that is, okay? But like I said, they were done in this season with injuries. They were done in by the transfer portal. And on top of that, bad coaching decisions. And it all started when they lost Dylan Gabriel, after last year in the transfer portal to Oregon, because you expected him to kind of cushion that blow, if you will, with Oklahoma joining the SEC, trying to get acclimated to life there. Nonetheless, that didn't happen, and then of course losing quarterback Jackson Arnold in the transfer portal to Auburn. So Michael Hawkins was out there; he gave it everything he had yesterday for Oklahoma in their bowl loss to Navy, but nonetheless Oklahoma is hopeful that they can get the quarterback situation taken care of with former Washington State quarterback John Mateer, who is joining the Sooners for next year. But nonetheless, uh, the hot seat, in my opinion, is starting to heat up for head coach Brent Venables because, in my opinion, I don't think that he's Mr. Popularity right now in the great state of Oklahoma. You're talking about in 3 seasons in Norman, Venables' record is now 22-17, while he is just 12-14 in conference play. And to put that in comparison, if you will. You think about Lincoln Riley, and of course, I know that a lot of the folks in Norman are not happy with Lincoln Riley due to the fact that he left like a thief in the night a couple of years ago to go to USC. But nonetheless, during Lincoln Riley's 5 years as Oklahoma's head ball coach, the Sooners only lost 10 games. They were right there to consistently win the Big 12, get to the college football playoff, you name it. And of course, the Sooners have not sniffed that under Brent Venables. No Big 12 championships in his 2 years there. And of course, they didn't even come close to competing for the SEC championship this time around, as they were near the bottom of the standings in the Southeastern Conference. Oklahoma's only 2 wins in the SEC this season came with their upset win over Alabama and their win at Auburn back in September. But nonetheless, things have got to change because there is a standard when you think about an institution like Oklahoma when it comes to football. To give you an idea of where things were from 1999 to 2021, first under head coach Bob Stoops and then head coach Lincoln Riley. The Sooners never had a losing season. They won 11 Big 12 championships. They made 4 college football playoff appearances, 4 BCS championship game appearances, and they also had a national championship to boot. Okay, you think about the Sooners during that time, you think about a team that was consistently in the top 10. You think about a program that was consistently sending players to the National Football League in the early rounds of the draft. That is not happening right now. And nonetheless, the onus is going to be on Brent Venables heading into 2025. And honestly, the loss to Navy, in my opinion, just sped up the clock. The Sooners do have a solid recruiting class coming in for next season. They need to go out there and make an impact. The Sooners have put their eggs into the basket of John Mateer at quarterback. And of course, we saw the success that he had at Washington State. But, clearly he's not bringing his coach with him. His coach at Washington State is now at Wake Forest. So will Mateer have that same success with Oklahoma in the SEC? That's going to be the big thing. A lot of times we've seen teams, some have success, some not, as far as going out there in the transfer portal, especially at the quarterback position. And it's just like in the NFL. You got to go out there and you got to spend money on the right guys. And you also have to spend money on the guys that are going to fit into your system. That is key. And I'll tell you like this, if things don't work out with John Mateer at quarterback next year for Oklahoma, I guarantee you 2025 will be Brent Venables' last year in Norman as a head coach. It's one of those for me. That goes to my next question. Is Brent Venables the guy to get things turned around in Norman? And how much patience will the people have with him there? It's one of those where Venables, to me, in my opinion, is looking more and more like a guy who's a good defensive coordinator, but it's not translating to being a head coach. And like I said, it's one of those where I think a lot of people were taken by surprise when Lincoln Riley decided to leave Oklahoma for USC. It's one of those where you simply don't leave Oklahoma. If you're going to leave Oklahoma, you're going to leave for like a job in the National Football League. Okay. It's one of those, and that's no disrespect to USC because that is also a prestigious football program. But nonetheless, you very rarely see coaches leave big time programs like Oklahoma. Of course, we know that it was all about the money. But nonetheless, I think that the Sooners, in replacing Riley, were trying to keep it within the family, if you will. I know that Venables in recent years did have success as the defensive coordinator at Clemson, of course, but he really made his name on that side of the football as a defensive coordinator under Bob Stoops at Oklahoma before they parted ways. But nonetheless, maybe just maybe it might be time if things don't work out with Venables in 2025. It might be time for Oklahoma to think outside of the box, go outside of the family, and find their next ball coach that is going to allow them to keep up with the Joneses in the SEC. And of course, Oklahoma is one of those Joneses. So The thing is, the folks in Norman, I don't expect them to have a ton of patience with Brent Venables because you're talking about a situation now that you've had two losing seasons in the last 3 years. That is not going to cut it at a place like Oklahoma. Oklahoma is expected to contend for conference championships. Oklahoma is expected to contend for national championships. And of course, we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing a team that's a middle of the road team under Brent Venables. You're getting blown out by Texas. That's not going to get it done. So I really do think, and I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, but the onus is on Brent Venables for the winter and the spring to try to get things turned around for the Sooners. I mean, you look at their schedule for next year. And it's one of those where, it's pretty favorable to begin the year. And I think Oklahoma needs to come out like gangbusters for 2025, heading into the SEC portion of their slate. They begin with Illinois State at home. They've got Michigan at home on September 6th. They're in Philly to take on Temple on the 13th of September. And then they host Auburn on the 20th of September before they're off to finish the month. And then they host Kent State before they go to Dallas to take on Oklahoma. And then the meat and potatoes of that SEC slate begins. And again, three out of their last four conference games at Tennessee, at Alabama, and then they're home for LSU. So the bottom line is it's put up or shut up time for Brent Venables. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is where the rubber meets the road. And if he can't get it done, and if he's unable to live up to the high expectations for this team in Norman, then guess what? The Sooner faithful will find somebody else to lead their football program real soon. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.